Sam Bankman-Fried. I think he's fried. We'll be talking about this next. Giddy up. Well, here we go. We got my main man, the CEO of Market Rebellion. That is Marc LoPresti. And it's always fun to have Marc here. Look at him. He always outdresses us, whether it's me or John or whoever. He always looks a little bit more handsome. He's always got the great, the unbelievable clothing on. Everything looks pretty good. How is it in New Jersey today for you, Marc? Everything good?
It's great. Getting ready for Easter weekend, Good Friday, of course. It is a little cold and rainy. But I'm not sad, Pete, because as you know, the Market Rebellion team knows, and I think most of the great Rebel Nation knows, we're all going to be in much warmer climate next week in beautiful Miami, Hollywood to be precise, North Beach, where we are going to be supporting and you and John on stage with our friend Grant Cardone at the incredible 10X GrowthCon conference, a celebrity lineup of A-listers so secret that I'm not allowed. It's true. I'm not allowed. We're under strict non-disclosure. We cannot tell you who we're going to be on stage with, but I promise everyone you're going to recognize just about everybody in the lineup. It can't be missed. If you haven't already, can't join us in person. It's April 2 to 4, Hollywood, Florida, at the Diplomat Hotel. You can still, it's a little bit more time to sign up live virtually. 10X GrowthCon, I believe, is the website. Producer Jared can check that for me while we go. But go ahead, smash that link. If you just Google 10X GrowthCon, you'll find it, and you can sign up to join us virtually for 3 action-packed days of financial education content, April 2 to 4. Don't miss it.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm going to leak 2 names that are there. John and Pete Najarian. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm telling you, I did look at the list, and I'm like, holy crap. I mean, really?
Yeah.
And there's a few of them on there that I have bumped into before and rubbed shoulders with before. So this will be a lot of fun, man. This is what the Cardone family and what he does and how they do it is always first class, and it's going to be amazing. And we're really looking forward to it, Marc. I can't wait. And I think there's going to be some really interesting accommodations for you and I and some of the gang down there. So that ought to be pretty fun as well. All right.
That's 10xvirtual.com for those virtual tickets.
By the way, that ghost or that voice, that's our man, Jared, who runs everything that goes on here. Fantastic. Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate that. Marc, let's jump into the macro minute for just a minute. Sam Bankman-Fried, I'm going to actually let you talk about that. I just want to remind everybody, that on Friday, it's already going to be closed. But even though we're closed, we're going to be getting that PCE I talked about yesterday. And because of the fact that we talk about inflation all the time and what it looks like, that will be the latest data figure that we're going to get. So that's going to be very, very important. And yet the market's kind of, they've kind of ignored it for now. We'll see what happens come tomorrow. What do you got, Marc?
Yeah, PCE and PCI, the Fed's 2 most favorite gauges of how the economy's doing and inflation and so forth. So that's going to be an important print, even on a day off in observance of Good Friday. But yeah, I think it's Sam Bankman-Fried instead of Sam Bankman-Fried. And look, this guy kind of deserves it. I mean, let's be honest. The arrogance that he's displayed throughout the process has been remarkable. He got his ass thrown in jail even after being out on bond because he couldn't help himself but text his ex-girlfriend, communicate with witnesses. That is a big no-no when you're facing, 63 federal charges for one of the most sweeping frauds since, not one of the most sweeping fraud cases since Bernie Madoff. The Fed's at the top of the so-called sentencing guidelines, which is this book that's used by prosecutors to essentially determine how much time somebody should get based on the crime they committed, whether or not they were remorseful. The impact on the victims was looking at 110 years. So the 25 that SBF got in a comparison does not seem as bad. People said, he's going to die in prison. An old man, Sam, is 31 or 32, if I'm not mistaken. So, he will be eligible for AARP benefits when he gets out. But if he survives the prison experience, he'll still have a few years left in him. And look, this was as much, in my opinion, Pete, an indictment and a sentencing of the crypto wrongdoers in general. I think there was as much a desire on the part of the feds to make an example, to sort of scare others that might be thinking about crypto chicanery, that they will not take kindly to it. So, 25 years for SBF.
Well, Mark's not eligible for AARP, but I am. Anyway, let's go on. Let's go on to the fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Mark, what I wanted to point out is in the first 3 months of the year, and we talk about this almost every day, whether it's me or it's John or it's you occasionally when you're on here as well. But when I look at what's going on with crude oil, and I go back to sitting down with Maria Bartiromo back in January saying, there's something nobody's talking about here. We see unusual option activity all the time in the energy space, and we're seeing this move. And if you look at the start of the year, we were at $68 a barrel. Where are we right now? Well, very close to $83 a barrel. This has been a really nice run. We've seen a lot in the ETF of energy. We've seen a lot there, but a lot of individual names as well. And this explosive move to the upside. So I think for the futures perspective, I think crude oil just continues to be each and every day something that's been pretty amazing. I don't think it's done yet, Mark. I think this is going to go a lot higher.
Yeah, and look, if you look back, for those of you that remember the shows that we did going into the end of 23, even when you were on that well-earned vacation with your lovely wife, we've been saying we are remaining bullish on crude. There's just so many reasons, right? There's all the macro forces. There's the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Believe it or not, what happened tragically in Baltimore the day before yesterday, or yesterday, I guess that was, also impacting supply chain for oil and gas, but oil in particular. OPEC keeping a close eye on all of this, restricting supply as they're known to do to help keep the prices up. Russia, China, there's so much macro going on that impacts oil's volatility. And typically speaking, volatility in oil tends to trend higher. So yeah, I'm still bullish on oil and the energy sector in general, Pete. Also M&A like crazy in energy, which we also talked about in January.
Yeah, there has been a lot of that. The M&A has been dominant. There's no doubt about that. All right, we're going to jump to some of these stocks that we've got up there. We've got all these lined up. Jared's in charge of all that. We're going to start off with Restoration Hardware. They don't call it that anymore. It's RH, but nonetheless, just so everybody knows what it is. By the way, the earnings itself, really not all that great. You look at them and you say, wow, these guys are kind of struggling right now. So why is the stock up 18%? I can give you that answer. They are projecting out an outlook that looks very, very bullish. And what they've done is they have done everything they can to change the company, to get it moving in the right direction once again. And they've done what they can. And now they feel like they're in that spot. And then now they're projecting for this year to be very, very important for them, but not only important, but something that they think is going to be a really good year. The revenue that they're projecting right now for the full year is about 9% higher, and they were actually looking for about 7% higher, a little bit more than 7% higher. So when you look at these, and we talk about this all the time, yes, it's very important. What did the earnings look like? What does the revenue look like? But in this case, we know this is something that's been a big, huge workshop that they've been doing to try to change things up. And as they've done that, now they're projecting, which we always talk about, hey, it's about the guidance. The guidance is good. That stock is absolutely ripping to the upside today.
Yeah, I would, to coin a phrase from our friend Larry David, I would curb my enthusiasm here a little bit on this one. I'm surprised to see the street running the stock up as much as it has. This company's earnings, backward looking, I'm confident, Pete, were impacted by reduced consumer spending, particularly in the luxury goods sector that we saw as consumers, even the higher end of the market, spending more money on experiences and services. This is really, whether or not they can meet these projections is really about whether or not they can accurately predict when that trend is going to turn, right? So there's only so much they can do to retool and bring their costs down. Those are obviously very ambitious and admirable goals, but the consumer in the luxury brand and luxury goods market's got to come back. Housing, a big part of that. So yeah, I don't see that changing dramatically in 2024. I think you're going to see some steam come off this stock, if not today, but tomorrow. This is getting bid up too high.
And when I look at building materials and then all of a sudden I look over at Home Depot and see what they
Yeah.
just did, an $18 billion deal, an
Yeah.
acquisition that they're making, the biggest they've ever made. Pretty incredible, Mark. So there's something going on, and you always want to know all of the backdrop, right? From the foundation all the way up. And so
Right.
we've got the foundation with Home Depot and this huge acquisition, and then you've got that next level of Restoration Hardware and what they're trying to do with the luxury market. Pretty interesting. All right. Next up, we've got Sprinklr. Now, CXM is a very interesting little company, doesn't do a whole lot. It had a pretty interesting earnings where when you look at the revenue, they were up about 17.5%. It was kind of a mixed bag, but overall, because of that number, I think people were pretty impressed. But when you look at the profits and what they're doing there, they're moving in the right direction. They were looking a year ago, they actually earned 6 cents. Now they're earning 12 cents. So a lot of positives to look at. This is a stock that's in a fairly tight range, $11 to about $17. That's the 52-week low and high. And today it popped up to 14. It didn't last very long, eased right back towards 13. I like this stock enough that I actually own some, so I got to be open about that. But I tell you what, I'm a little bit disappointed. It's taken too long. I'm getting a little bit frustrated, but I do like the fact that we are seeing improvements in the earnings. So for that reason, I'm holding on to it, Mark.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a smart move, Pete. The reason why things have been a little disappointing historically over the past year and a half period is really one thing, right? It's pump and JPOW and interest rates. When companies and corporations are facing increased cost of capital, they tend to spend less on the nice to haves, and customer experience software. It's kind of considered sales and marketing. What these guys do, it's great stuff. I'm not trying to suggest it isn't. But it's the kind of thing that people take their foot off the gas a little bit when they're capital constrained as a result of high interest rates. That they will benefit, of course, as the Fed starts to bring rates down this year, as we expect them to do. So the company should benefit from that. So I'd hold on to it if I had it for sure, not counting this one out.
Well, we got another one, MillerKnoll, furnishings, that whole world, the fixtures and that type of thing. Fundamentally, you got to like what you see. I mean, I look at the free cash flow, $350 million. I look from a fundamental standpoint, everything checks every box. The one issue that they had on this one, stock had run all the way up near that 52-week high. And then all of a sudden, year over year, the sales are down about 11%. That's a little bit concerning. And I think that's why it's down. I think last I looked, it was down about 16%. But it was sniffing right around that 52-week high mark. So 13 to 31, that's what the range looks like. Today it's trading around 25 or thereabouts, somewhere very close to that. I like this one. I think fundamentally it makes a lot of sense, and a lot of positive buyers out there that are insiders going in and buying and accumulating some stock. There's some sellers as well, but when you look at the buyers are dwarfing what we're seeing from the sellers. So I think that's something that tells me they think it's too cheap. They think this thing's actually traveling in the right direction. Maybe not today, but maybe there's going to be a little bit more of a trigger to buy even more.
Yeah, listen, the insider buying and selling is something that we and other smart money traders watch very, very carefully, particularly the buying. And the reason for that is when executives that get these incentive stock option plans want to sell, right, just for their own personal liquidity, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bearish on the company. They have to do it pursuant to an organized plan, a leak out plan, and that's to avoid trading, selling on inside information and problems like that. So the selling tends to be somewhat predictable, and you can actually look at it in the company's filings. The buying, however, is often in a separate category. So I tend to look at that a little bit differently and put a little more weight on it. That's just my personal opinion, Pete. And I think, look, this is a continuation of the RH story. It's a continuation of the Home Depot story. There is an anticipation in the industry, housing, furnishings, building supplies, things of that nature, that as the Fed eases off on rates, that industry is going to come back. John likes to say all the time, construction, the largest single sector employer in the United States. And this is all planning, anticipation, and guidance around when these CEOs and their teams think that happy days will come back. I don't think it's this year. I don't think 75 basis point cuts does enough to people's average monthly mortgage rate to get them to go, as we talk all the time, from a 2.5 or 2 3/4 fixed to a variable that's still going to be a lot more expensive, even if it's 75 basis points lower. So I think this is a 2025 story.
Cool. I like it. Verint Systems is our last one. It's just another software company. I look at this, Mark, and in every way, these guys have done an unbelievable job, which is why the stock is up about 8% today. It's not too far off of that 52-week high with $40 a share. But I look at revenue year over year, it's up 12%. I look over at earnings. Those are now 107 versus 61 a year ago. Free cash flow up 20%. Gross margins higher. Strong outlook. Boom. I think they've checked every box. But not only did they do all of that, and I did not know this about this company, AI-powered customer engagement. All you've got to do, Mark, as we know, this whole earnings season we've talked about, if you say the letters A and I and put them together, people are generally going to buy. That's exactly what we're doing. But it's not just about that. They are executing at a very high level. So I think this one's very, very interesting. And it's a stock that I've missed out on it, but I'm keeping a very close eye on it because I'd love to see the opportunity of, well, maybe it went up too fast. Somebody sells it off and gives us all an opportunity to get in there again. I'm not going to chase it, but I'm certainly watching it.
Yeah, and watch, you should, and maybe look to buy on dips. Look, this one is in the space, and I've been talking about it. This was my big bull thesis for the year, and I'll repeat it. I talked about it this morning on my Wharton Business Daily Sirius XM show with my friend Dan Looney. This is not another Chat GPT also ran. Of course, we talked this morning on the news of Amazon putting another $3.75 billion into a Chat GPT competitor to try to expand their dominance in that space. But this company, to be precise, is in that B2B AI, B2B cloud infrastructure, not B2C. B2C is great. But again, as I've said from the beginning of the year, where the real money is going to be made this year in AI is B2B, companies that offer those products and solution suites that enable corporations to use AI more efficiently to do things better, faster, stronger. Like remember the $6 Million Man back in the 70s, Pete? Was one of my favorite shows growing up as a kid, right? So that's part of what these guys do. They leverage cloud infrastructure, AR architecture. They're agnostic. It could be Amazon as their back-end provider. It could be Microsoft. It could be somebody else. And they try to put the best in class in front of the corporate consumer as their customer. I like this one. I might, again, if I see any sell-offs, I might look to pick some of this up. I'm bullish on this stock.
You and I both, we sound like we're together on that. And by the way, the $6 Million Man, I've always been jealous of him, not just because of what he had inside of him and all that, but he's also married to Farrah Fawcett.
I was going to say, it was the $6 Million woman. There had to be some,
Let me tell you, Farrah Fawcett, that's a smoke show, and that's a story for another time. Anyway, so let's just jump into the sports, Mark. And I was going to let you maybe kind of kick it off to me because, kick it off, you get it? Anyway, NFL, we've had a lot of pro days, right? And a lot of things going on, a lot going on in terms of projections in the draft, right?
Yeah, well, so for the unindoctrinated or the not as indoctrinated as perhaps you or John in this particular sector, what is the relevance of the pro days vis-a-vis the draft? What does it tell us, and what can we read from those tea leaves from the pro days games?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the guys, you may or may not know this, but a lot of the guys, usually there's 3 or 4 at almost every position that don't participate at the combine. And they do it for a specific reason. They don't want to be caught off guard. And I can give you a great example of that. We had a guy at the University of Minnesota here who went to the combine. He had a surgery on his knee. It was way too soon to get back in there. But he kind of felt like, you know what? I need to show him right now what I can do. And he ran a slow 40 time. This is a safety. He's the number 1 safety in the draft, by the way. And I was just with him on Saturday. We were watching Gopher football practice together. The pro day was just a few days before that. And what they do at the pro days is they give you an opportunity to really show your very best in your own spot, right? He's at the University of Minnesota. And there are other schools that are invited there that have players available to be able to do stuff for the NFL. And so he was one of those guys out there. So he went, just to give you exact numbers, he went from having a 4.7 40 time at the combine, which is very slow for a safety, to a 4.4. So this kid is 6'3", 210 pounds, and his money just went from the very bottom here to somewhere very nice and high based upon what he did at the pro day. But you're in your home environment and all the rest of that. And one of the guys who's really getting a big bump right now is J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback from Michigan. They won the national title. I'm still in that camp of maybe he's a systems guy, Mark. Maybe it's the fact that he had a great running back, great offensive line, really good tight ends, outstanding wide receivers. And oh, by the way, the defense was so good, they gave him a lot of opportunities to get back onto the field and score more points. So guys like that, I think, really do start to move higher and higher on the draft. He used to be a guy who was probably projected, somewhere in of the quarterbacks, maybe number 5, maybe number 6 of the quarterbacks. Now he's considered maybe number 1 and 2 of the quarterbacks. So people have looked at him. His pro day was outstanding. They really walked away from that. Jaden Daniels is a quarterback out of LSU. Same sort of a story. And it happens at other positions. It's not just the quarterbacks, but when you've got 6 quarterbacks going into the draft that are likely to go in the first round, it's pretty amazing. So this is one of those years. You go back to 1983, that was a huge year for quarterbacks. You go to other years, it's 5 and 6 deep. So everybody's trying to position themselves. I think you're a Giants guy, or are you a Jets guy? I always forget that. I think it's Giants, isn't it?
It's Jets, unfortunately, and we know why it's unfortunate. But hey, listen, we only got a couple minutes left, and I know we want to talk NBA. We were going to talk about the greatest surprise in terms of coming into the NBA Finals. But just before we went live, Pete, something crossed the tape. And it's Minnesota related, and it involves my friend Alex Rodriguez. So I got to ask you, his deal, which I thought and most people believe was kind of signed, sealed, and delivered to buy the Timberwolves, apparently fell apart like a cheap taco in the Los Angeles Heat. What do you make of this?
This has been absolutely an amazing thing, Mark, and I've actually kept up with it. I know a couple of guys who are smaller owners of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I also know the guy who's the primary guy who's been selling it thought he was selling it to A-Rod and to Lurie and all these guys. But for whatever reason, this has been something that's been rumored for months now. Like they apparently are not able to get all of the assets that they need to be able to execute this transaction. So it's been a very, very interesting thing, Mark. I don't know what to make of it. I'm not sure why they'd walk away. I can tell you this, as a guy who used to be a Timberwolves monster fan, I mean, I had season tickets for many, many years. I was in the Dome Stadium. I was in Target Center when they opened that up for the basketball team. It's kind of amazing that what's going on here. And I think that the owner himself is probably okay to continue to hold on then. I mean, Glenn is a great guy. He's from Southern Minnesota, big farming type world and all the rest of it, made a lot of money. And he's been the owner since day one, the primary owner. But it's been really, really interesting, Mark, to see how the money situation has not really come to the point where they actually are at the finish line. And like I said, it's been rumored for a while.
Yeah, you got to wonder. I mean, people don't realize that some sports diehard fans do. These things, you can't just buy a national franchise from the NFL, the NBA, or Major or MLB. There's all kinds of rules. You have to be approved. You have to be considered, additive to the local. I wonder if A-Rod's New York swagger just didn't cut it for the rest of the owners of the team. It's one of the things. I've been involved as a lawyer in my previous life, Pete, in a couple of major league teams, one in MLB and New York team. You can guess which one, that a very wealthy family that got impacted by the last SBF needed to deal with their ownership stake to come up with some cash. And you can't just go in and buy a team because you've got the most money. It's a country club. They got to want you. You got to meet the requirements, and you can be declined. So I wonder if there was pressure, pushback from some of the other minority owners who might have and often do have rights, veto rights, or certainly rights to object. So I'm going to be very curious to see how this one in the post-mortem, why this deal fell apart. But I know that Alex was very disappointed, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing because this has been going on for years, and we've seen them here a lot. They've been here not for every single game, of course, but they've been here for a lot of the games. They travel, they do all the things that you'd expect future owners to do. Yeah. And your point, it is something where you've got to go through a lot of hoops to be able to be eligible to buy a team.
No pun intended.
Right. And that's true of all the major sports. It's an incredible thing. Last thing I'll just say is this, sticking to basketball for 1 second. Boston's been there all year, but that was expected. I think that what's shocking is how bad Philadelphia is playing, how bad Miami's playing. We're talking about teams that have been in the playoffs consistently that are no longer there, and how good Cleveland looks without LeBron James, by the way. And you know what? With LeBron James, the Lakers don't look all that hot. They aren't. But New Orleans is scary. There's some really good teams, I think, in the West right now. That's where New Orleans finds themselves. They've still got that big man in the middle who's unbelievable. Dallas is one of those teams. But I keep talking and pumping up my Timberwolves, man. They've got 50 wins now. They haven't done that in about 20 years or something close to that. They've got a guy who I think should be the MVP of the league. They've got a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. So I expect them to go deep. And if they don't, then it's a very disappointing year, because they've been basically either number one or number two at the top of the Western Division the entire year. You see
how I did that, by the way, Pete? I teed up that Timberwolves story with the business side, but knowing that you would bring it. That's what we call like the arc, folks. Like when people are really good at this. I don't think ESPN's going to be calling for a contract with me anytime soon, but we're getting better at this.
Well, I used to work at ESPN, so maybe I can kind of knock on the door and open the door and get us back right in there. So we'll do it. Marc, it's been great. Really, really enjoy it. Thanks a lot. I know it's going to be a great weekend. We're really looking forward to that. You're doing an amazing job, not just here, but as the CEO of Market Rebellion. So we appreciate it for that. And everybody else, I hope you have a great long weekend, safe one. And we will see you Monday through Thursday next week, 1 p.m.